Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. Lawrence Okolie, in the latest WBC rankings, has been installed as #1 contender. This has caused a lot of controversy because he's only had one fight at heavyweight against some miscellaneous opponent from Germany. So people are asking, how on earth could he be ranked this highly? Above Fabio Wardley, various other people there in the rankings. In fact, there's quite a few people there who maybe shouldn't be ranked that highly by the WBC, and perhaps they should have some other names in there. But Lawrence Okolie at #1 above Wardley, Joshua, Ajagba, Okolie, Frank Sanchez, Zheli Zhang. I mean, a lot of these guys are coming off losses, right? Filip Hrgović. So you got Hrgović coming off a loss, Zhang coming off a loss, Sanchez coming off a loss, Okolie coming off a loss, and Anthony Joshua coming off a loss. So maybe not the greatest rankings in the world for the WBC, right? In any event, does Lawrence Okolie deserve to be above all these guys? Well, part of the reason that he's been ranked this high by the WBC is because he was Bridgerweight champion and he gave up that belt. He didn't get beat for it. So that apparently holds some favor with the WBC. But that could account for why he received the top 5 ranking when he first moved up to heavyweight. But beating that guy from Germany, again, a miscellaneous opponent, why would that bump him up, let's say 3 or 4 more places to the #1 spot? I definitely don't agree with that. But the WBC are not alone in acting like this. The WBO, for example, when you are a champion in one weight class, if you move up to the weight class above, you immediately get installed as mandatory challenger. I think that's if you simultaneously hold belts in both divisions. Because, for example, Alexander Usyk, despite the fact that he had 2 fights to acclimatize to the heavyweight division against Chaz Witherspoon and Derek Chisora, he was immediately installed as Anthony Joshua's mandatory when he moved up to heavyweight. And we've seen that in various other weight classes as well. So that's how the WBO do it. The WBC is actually not that extreme. They're not making you mandatory challenger. They're just giving you a high ranking because you held a belt in a lower weight class recently. A WBC belt in a lower weight class recently. So, yeah, that's what has happened here with Lawrence Okolie. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm not saying I agree with their top 10 at all. There are many people in there who probably shouldn't be, or at least should be ranked lower, and maybe fighters who should be in the rankings that are not. Be that as it may, Okolie has found himself up there. Now, what you can't see on screen is, obviously, Usyk is the main WBC champion, but Ajit Kabayel is the interim WBC champion. So, people wondering where Kabayel is, he should be there. He should be getting the opportunity. Yeah, he's the interim WBC heavyweight champion. That's what the fight against Zheli Zhang was for, the vacant interim WBC belt. So could we see Lawrence Okolie fight Ajit Kabayel for the interim title? That's a possibility because, if Alexander Usyk is going to fight for undisputed again against Daniel Dubois, and the WBA have given Usyk, I think, 2 years, which is ridiculous, to fight whoever he wants before they impose a mandatory on him. Usyk probably won't be around for that long. He says he's only got 2 fights left. So anyway, as the belts are tied up, in the meantime, some of these contenders may choose to fight each other, especially if the Saudis are willing to stump up some big money for it. So we could see Lawrence Okolie versus Ajit Kabayel. Other people have called for Joseph Parker to fight Kabayel. Yeah, I like that fight as well. Okolie says he's up for fighting anybody. He put his name forward, since he's based in Dubai, to step in and fight Joseph Parker when Daniel Dubois fell ill. I know a lot of people don't buy this idea that he was ill, but let's just, for argument's sake, say he fell ill. Lawrence Okolie put his name forward, and in hindsight, and hindsight is always 20/20, he would have been a better choice than Martin Okolie, because Okolie wasn't in any kind of shape. He had to fly across the world. He hadn't been in training camp. He hadn't sparred for like 6 months. He was, as I say, vastly overweight, tired, etc., etc., etc. And he was an absolute dud against Joseph Parker. Whereas Lawrence Okolie, based out in Dubai, was in the gym, trains in Dubai. His trainer Joe Gallagher is based in Saudi Arabia, or at least part of the time, with the Mike Tyson gym. So, again, in retrospect, Lawrence Okolie would have been a far better replacement than Martin Okolie. Hindsight, again, always being 20/20. So, yeah, Lawrence Okolie, since his move up from cruiserweight, has chinned someone at bridgerweight, Rosansky, who knocked out Alan Babbage in 1 round. He also chinned, as I say, the German miscellaneous heavyweight in 1 round in his heavyweight debut. hasn't fought anyone with a pulse at heavyweight yet. So again, that's part of the reason people don't like this ranking. But I'm kind of curious to see what Lawrence Okolie will be like against a name in the heavyweight division. Whether he'll be effective with the fact he's fully hydrated now, punching harder. He was always physically strong as a cruiserweight. How will that physical strength translate to the heavyweight division? You know, he's got kind of a weird style for a guy of his build, Lawrence Okolie. If you watched him in his last fight, despite having a lot of padding around his midriff, he was bouncing around the ring on his toes and then letting that big right hand go. And Joe Gallagher, who was on Simon Jordan's podcast on TalkSport the other day, spoke about how impressed he's been with Lawrence Okolie since they started training together and how much they've worked on Okolie not holding, on Okolie letting his hands go and just being more confident in there with the extra weight. We'll see how that works out for Lawrence Okolie against Richard Riakporhe. It's almost like, I don't want to say soft introduction, because Richard Riakporhe was a champion at cruiserweight. Not a champion, a top contender anyway at cruiserweight. He challenged for the title against Chris Billum-Smith. So he was a top contender at cruiserweight. Moving up to heavyweight, again, he'll be better hydrated and whatnot, but he's not an established heavyweight is the point I'm making. So technically, yeah, he'll be a heavyweight. In that sense, it'll be a way for Lawrence Okolie to dip his toe in the water with someone who is a decent level, but not an established fighter in the division. You know, he was established in a lighter weight class. So let's see what happens there. I expect Lawrence Okolie to beat Richard Riakporhe. I think he'll probably stop him, but time will tell and we shall see. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. Lawrence Okolie getting this lofty ranking by the WBC. How outraged by it are you? Lawrence Okolie, 21-1 with those 16 KOs, former two-weight world champion.